What's going on, everybody? Bryan Cameron here, managing editor of PSN's Eagles teams, co-host of Flipping the Birds, and this is the Eagles Stock Watch for Week 11. This is our best way to help you keep your finger on the pulse of everything Eagles. If you were living under a rock, the Eagles defeated the Dallas Cowboys 34-6 on Sunday afternoon, and it was a tough battle at first, right? You saw them struggle a bit at first. First half wasn't the greatest first half for the offense. Second half, you started to kind of see everybody hitting their strides. Defensively, from the beginning to end, it was an incredible effort. It's exactly what you expected to see from a team of this caliber due to a team like the Dallas Cowboys that is currently sinking without their QB and with so many things going wrong over there. But that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the Philadelphia Eagles and who's rising and who's falling after Week 11, heading into a very pivotal match against the Commanders on Thursday night. Jalen Hurts is going to be our first guy. We're going to talk about stock rising right now. Hurts went 6 for 7 for 79 yards with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception when targeting the middle of the field. This has been a sore eye for a lot of critics out there of Jalen Hurts, where they feel like he didn't target the middle field as much. We did see him hit A.J. Brown with a slant. We did see him just hit multiple receivers. He's been growing ever since the bye week, and he's developing into the passer that we expected him to be after the Super Bowl win. Jalen Hurts also using his feet. I mean, he looks as healthy as can be, regardless of the injury report issue where Sirianni came out saying that it was an ankle issue. But then the Eagles staff said it was a matter of just him resting. Whatever the case was, Jalen Hurts did rush for 56 yards. He did rush for 2 touchdowns. He did throw for 2 touchdowns. Hurts is coming into his own at a very critical point of the Eagles season, where now, because of this win, they are the 2nd seed in the NFC. They are the number 1 seed in the NFC East. And they're going into a matchup where if they beat the Commanders, they'll be up 2 games on the Commanders, and they'll be drawing closer to the Lions, especially if the Lions lose tonight against the Houston Texans, which they currently are at this very moment. Outside of Jalen Hurts, the offense, they did things that they were supposed to do. A.J. Brown, 109 receiving yards. You had Saquon Barkley rush for 66 yards. It wasn't an incredible offensive attack, right? But it was the one needed to put the Dallas Cowboys away. On our next rising star is going to be the defense. Defensively, all around, they've turned a huge corner as of late. Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond are not being talked about enough as a duo. Together today, they had about 14 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, specifically from Zach Bond, who, as a free agent signing, coming into this defense, at first and when the season started, there were a lot of questions. What he would be, what Nakobe Dean would be, what Devin White would be. Devin White is no longer here. Nakobe Dean is exactly who we wanted him to be when they drafted him in the 3rd round. And Zach Bond is somebody that nobody expected him to be who he is at this moment. He's the Eagles' leading tackler, and quite frankly, probably the better linebacker of the 2 at the moment. He had 2 forced fumbles. He's been showing up week after week with turnovers, with just applying pressure as well on the quarterback. Zach Bond has been doing everything asked of him, and it seems like he's found his comfort zone within Philadelphia. So I would not be surprised if at some point soon, towards the end of the season, we see a great contract extension that was well-deserved, and hopefully we see Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean become staples of this defense for years to come. Aside of those two, you have to admire the fact that we finally saw a C.J. Gardner-Johnson interception. The first one of this season. He's had countless opportunities to get one, but it's always somehow, some way fallen too short of it. Outside of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, the Eagles did collect 3 sacks. Not a huge, stat, right? Not the greatest stat you want to hear from a total defensive effort, but the pressures were there. Jalen Carter, 4 total pressures, a half a sack. BG, half a sack. Milton Williams, 3 total pressures, a sack. Bryce Huff, who many, wrote off already, showed up with a sack and a forced fumble, which led to a turnover for the Cowboys. And it just shows that this defensive line, in comparison to last season's, they're playing with each other for each other. They're making moves where you see Jalen Carter forcing the QB to run to his left, running into a Josh Sweat, or running into a Bryce Huff or Nolan Smith. we're seeing a great rotation at the moment. I know a lot of people are down on Jordan Davis. They feel like Jordan Davis should be more involved because he's a first-round pick. But right now, you're seeing Vic Fangio play to the defensive line's strength. Jordan Davis is a great run defender. He's going to be in there to stop the run. You're seeing Josh Sweat attack the passer. You're seeing Bryce Huff actually become a bit more comfortable in his position. You have to give credit to where credit is due. Vic Fangio is taking a defensive group that wasn't completely built for him and is making it work to the best of his ability. Most perfect game. The offensive line as a whole did not. Fred Johnson was actually the highest graded offensive lineman alongside of Lane Johnson, who was actually second in this game. But the concern was Cam Jurgens, was Mekhi Becton, who did struggle. Each allowed three pressures and 2 hurries apiece as well. Cam Jurgens, if I'm not mistaken, allowed a sack, and he was actually the lowest graded offensive lineman. I think PFF gave him a score of like 26.3 with pass blocking. That was a huge concern, mainly because you saw Micah Parsons and the Dallas defensive line just live in the backfield for majority of the first half. Jalen Hurts was on very thin ice, and he was rolling around as much as he possibly can. And while he did have enough time to find a guy, my thinking is with Hurts back there and him witnessing 5 sacks early on is kind of, he was in panic mode all the time. The alarms were constantly ringing in his head the moment a Dallas defender came past an offensive lineman, which this cannot be a consistent thing going forward, especially against the Commanders. The Eagles need to regroup with the offensive line. Jeff Stoutland and the offensive unit has to come together and make something happen where Cam Jurgens and Mekhi Becton can't struggle like this again. Now, this is not to say that these guys are scrubs or anything of that sort, because we've seen Becton ball out. We've seen Cam ball out. It could just be an anomaly of this game. Micah Parsons is not a scrub. He's coming off an injury, sure, but he's still one of the better defensive linemen in the game. But we can't see Becton and Cam struggle again like this, especially if they're going into a stretch where they're facing the Commanders, the Los Angeles Rams, the Baltimore Ravens. This is a very crucial three-game stretch where if they can go 2-1 in this, you're possibly looking at the Eagles either fighting for the 1 seed or definitely taking a sustainable lead in the NFC East. One way or another, I don't think that this will be a continuous struggle going forward, but it was a cause for concern with, allowing 5 sacks in the first half. Come the second half, the Eagles' offensive unit looked great. Everything was perfectly fine. Jalen Hurts was comfortable in the pocket. He was making great spot-on throws. Still, in my opinion, one of the better deep passers in the game, in the league today. But I think that, overall, they'll be fine. But at the moment, I am going to rank them on just a little low and say that the stock is trending down just because 5 sacks, that's not what you want to see at the end of the day. You don't want your quarterback running around like a chicken with no head. Jalen Hurts, he's great on his feet, but you gotta allow him the time and the space to operate. And he was, I don't blame him for being so claustrophobic against the Cowboys on Sunday. Now let's continue on the idea of allowing pressure. My second person that stock is running low on is Kenny Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell has not been the same since that 2022 playoff run when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. That version of Kenny Gainwell was phenomenal in the playoffs. He was all over the place in the passing attack, in the run game. He was doing things that we wanted Miles Sanders to do. Ever since then, it seems like he has lost grip of who he is as a runner. He's had his great moments. He's had moments where he's popped off for 20 yards, 15 yards, even 30 yards at a time. That's all great and that's well. But in this season where the Eagles have a running back like Saquon Barkley, who's on pace to have the most touches in his career by the end of the season, the Eagles are going to rely on Kenny Gainwell more down the stretch. So they're going to need a guy like Kenny Gainwell to actually be able to navigate through the offensive line, hit the second level of the defense, and make things happen. Outside of that, my main cause of concern for him is the lack of ability when it comes to pass blocking. If you saw the game, then you know what I'm talking about. Stuck out like a sore thumb. Kenny Gainwell getting beat the moment the ball was snapped by that defender, which ended up being a sack against Jalen Hurts. Gainwell has struggled with pass blocking throughout his career. And when the Eagles signed Saquon Barkley, the idea was that Saquon was the all-around back that they needed. I don't believe that Eagles thought that Saquon would be on a pace where not only for career numbers, but also career touches. And if this is going to be a playoff team, or if this is going to be a team that goes down the stretch deep into the playoffs, then they're going to need a very healthy Saquon Barkley, a very well-rested Saquon Barkley, which means Kenny Gainwell has to step up significantly, or we should see more of Will Shipley, the rookie. One way or another, I do believe Gainwell still has the ability to make things happen. He's still the guy that I think, we saw him against the Jets years ago, where he just disappeared, behind the defensive line and rushed for a touchdown. Like, that's the guy that I feel like, we are all expecting to see. And with a guy like Saquon Barkley back there, I do expect Gainwell to bounce back or to hit some type of stride towards the end of the season, because the Eagles are going to need him to contribute a lot more, not only rushing the ball, but also with blocking. That's the main thing right now. With the offensive line not being as consistent as we have expected them to be in years past, they need guys like Gainwell, they need guys like Jack Stahl, Will Shipley to step up and do things that they're not accustomed to doing. And that main thing is going to be pass blocking. With all the great things that did go on in this game, we did have very, very, very few things that were alarming, that were concerning, right? You don't want to see your quarterback get sacked 5 times in the first half. Even though he did get sacked 5 times in the first half, the Eagles did put up double-digit points. They did take a sustainable lead going into the half, and they knew who they were up against. And that's why I feel like was really good about this game. Honorable mention for me is going to be Nick Sirianni, who coached very well today. He didn't coach with panic. He didn't coach with the unnecessary amount of urgency. He coached to his team's strength today. He allowed his team to do what they needed to do and to do what they did do best. We saw the touch push. We saw it succeed. We saw Jalen Hurts score in the end zone. We saw Jake Elliott, no 2-point conversions. Even though this team needed this win, you didn't feel that panic from the sidelines. You didn't feel that panic from the play calling. This team was operating at a smooth pace. It was operating at a very, very sustainable pace. If they can go into the Commanders game at the Link with this kind of pace, and I feel like this team is going to hit their stride at the right time, we're going to see a very dominant Eagles team for the long haul, and a very dominant Eagles team battling with the Lions and the Commanders for that number 1 seed. And in my best opinion, and I've said it for years on Flipping the Birds, number 1 seed, no team is going to want to come to Philadelphia during playoff time. It's just not fair to any of the opposing teams to come to Philly during the playoffs. And I feel like this team, of all teams, is very well built for the long haul. So with that being said, make sure you guys tune into Flipping the Birds on Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. We'll be recapping the Dallas Cowboys-Eagles game, and it will also be previewing the Commanders game. So until then, I'm Bryan Cameron, and this is our first edition of Eagles Stock Watch. I'm sorry if I don't have the outro completely ironed out. Still getting used to it. I hope you guys enjoy this. Please make sure you like, comment, and definitely subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care. Go Birds.